We are ready to start another Open Water webinar. I got to come up with a better name than webinar. Nobody likes webinars. These are informative sessions. These are great Q&As. These are fireside chats held virtually. And we've got a great one today. This is something I'm going to bet you have an idea about, but you don't really know what it's all about. That's a weird way of putting it. But we're going to talk about sabbaticals today. And I don't know if I mentioned, my name is Chris Albrecht. I am your host, and I am thrilled to have as my guest today, Annette Mason. She's the founder of Trilogy Design Works, but more important, she is an expert on sabbaticals, which doesn't sound impressive when I say it like that, because that just means that she'd be like, oh, you're an expert on taking time off to go improve yourself. Hey, good for you. No, this is actually really important because I think, like I said before, we all have a notion of what a sabbatical is, but I think that's a very narrow view of what a sabbatical is and how it can be beneficial. So we're bringing Annette in today to talk about it because she helps companies and people structure sabbaticals. So I'll stop talking and say, hello, Annette. Welcome to the show, and introduce yourself and what you do.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate being here. And yes, we'll dive into sabbaticals. A little bit about me. I am the founder of a company called Trilogy Design Works, and it's human-centered design applied to leadership and life skills. And how I got to become a leadership guide was doing my time in the corporate realm and having some fun and learning along the way, both personally and professionally. And I started a leadership practice in 2014. And these days I focus and I call myself a sabbaticalist and a leadership guide. So I take sabbaticals and I help others accomplish a more meaningful and purposeful sabbatical.
Okay, so let's define our terms. Everybody's probably heard of sabbatical, but how are you defining sabbatical right now?
How I define it is an intentional, ritual-filled time for a defined purpose and an allotment of time that's sufficient to work on a transformation.
Okay, so I want to sort of bring that back a little bit here, right? Because when I hear sabbatical, first thing I think it was like a professor, right? Like
Yes,
tenured professor
absolutely.
probably gets a sabbatical after a certain number of years. I've known other people at different companies where after, let's say, 7 years, you get a 3-month sabbatical, right? So how are we defining it, just like practically speaking, for someone who may be interested in either seeing if their company will start one or a company that's interested in starting one? How do you define that?
Yes. So how I define it is from a practical standpoint, I think people need at least 1 month to a minimum of a month to take a sabbatical. And typically it can be several weeks, it can be several months, it can be up to a year. Are there other parameters or other configurations? Yes, but typically if you want to plan for a sabbatical, you should plan for at least 1 month period.
Okay, so we've got that. Before we get any further into sort of structuring a sabbatical, what do you think are some common misconceptions about sabbaticals?
Well, you were naming some of them, that it's for academics. So the professions that regularly and have a structure and a way to take sabbaticals are typically academics and clergy. And it is usually in the academic realm, it's for research or development of their field of study.
Mm-hmm.
And in the clergy, it is a sense of renewal. Clergy are, sorry, I thought,
That's all right.
clergy are people that are caregivers. And that high demand, high kind of caregiving work, it can be depleting. And so if we go back for a minute and roll back to where did sabbatical come from? It came from a period of rest every 7 years. And it was actually done for the agricultural community and to let land rest for a year every 7 years.
Hmm.
Along with that, the people that tilled the land also had a period of rest for 7 years. So historically, that's where Sabbaths came from, or sabbaticals came from. And then the practice was picked up in academia and in many religious fields. And then it started being used in some forms of business. And these days, an important aspect of sabbaticals is a lot of people think, oh, you have to be in a big corporation, but even small startups incorporate sabbaticals with intention for what supports the business model, and the people that are going to go work there.
Okay, so let's pull it back out a little bit more, right? That's super interesting. I'd never known that about sort of how it ties back into agriculture. I think that's really fascinating. And what do you think? Why do you think sabbaticals are so important? Why are you focused on this and delivering sabbatical frameworks for people and corporations?
Yeah, because it's fascinating. Sabbaticals with an intention help people with their personal and professional well-being. And if we talk about a corporate environment for a minute, or organizational environment, um, one thing that has been an age-old problem is when there are thought leaders that are ready to move on, or ready to retire, or God forbid, something unexpected happens. The knowledge transfer and the ability for people inside of an organization to step into each other's roles is often challenging. So the benefit of a sabbatical is an individual gets an opportunity to renew or work on a purpose, might be research, might be a book, might need rest. And the people around them also get the opportunity to step into roles that they don't normally play. And it creates a sustainability opportunity for both the individual and the people around them. And that could also be an ecosystem like a family.
I think that's super interesting because I never thought about it. I always thought of sabbaticals as like a perk, right? Like, ooh, I worked 5 years, I get 3 months off, right? Like, look at me go, because I'm not writing a book, I'm not doing research or anything like that, right? Like, I think of it in that terms. And I think of it very like me, right? But what I'm hearing you say is that it's actually also the people around me who get the opportunity that they wouldn't normally get to sort of rise and shine, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that that is part of the space in the missed opportunity space, both for individuals and organizations. So some organizations have a sabbatical policy or have flexible leave policies on the books, but they're not levering them. They're not using them for the opportunity that actually is a win-win for the individual and the people and the organization.
Yeah. Well,
So
I always think of that like, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you're right. A lot of people think, oh, that's about me. I may feel I need it, but I can't ask for it because then that puts more work on other people. And that could be true, but the opportunity also exists. And a missed opportunity is co-designing and collaborating of how the work's going to get done while somebody's away. And we're here today talking about sabbaticals. The thing that's beautiful is people that are really forward thinking and trying to get the work done and recognize people have whole lives. This opportunity can happen every time somebody takes a long-term leave. So if
Yeah.
somebody takes a long-term leave for medical or parental, these same things, this co-design and collaboration, so that people can focus on what their intention is, and people around them can step into the roles and get the work done.
Yeah, it seems like it's when you frame it like that, it's a way to also the benefit for a company, let's say implementing one, isn't just that you're providing rest, but you're actually, to bring it back to the agriculture metaphor, you're planting the seeds for continued sort of corporate growth because you are renewing, you are giving others around somebody taking a sabbatical the chance to grow, and they get experience with that role in sort of a limited, we'll just say, capacity, but in one that is very meaningful, so that when somebody moves into either up or out of an organization, you aren't left flat-footed with someone who doesn't know anything about what the role is to like fill in.
That's right. That's right.
That I think that's super interesting. And I could see you leading with that when talking to companies about setting up sabbaticals.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I came to sabbaticals because of my personal life, my personal and professional life. But then I was able during our pandemic era where I was starting to write and I was planning to relaunch in 2020 trilogy using travel and immersive experiences as part of growing leadership skills. And during the time that I was writing and getting to pause once again with the rest of the world, I was able to realize, oh, there's some really known gritty problems that sabbaticals actually bring a creative and fun way to a problem set. So in an organization, a problem set is knowledge transfer and succession planning. So those are benefits for an organization. It's a fun way. It's a way to flip the switch. And one of the missed opportunities is both individuals and organizations will treat sabbaticals like a sink or swim proposition. Now, if we talk about individuals, you might have a progressive company that has a sabbatical policy. You might qualify for it. A popular question I get when I'm doing public speaking is, how do you have the courage to ask for a sabbatical?
Yeah.
And part of it is looking at what is the intention and what are the benefits, both individually and for the collective. And when you start stepping into the roles of the stakeholder and you realize, oh, this gives my team a chance to really shine during my absence, and we co-design how the work will get done. Now, is it all just? It's not all rainbows. There's some work involved in laying things out, but it gives people a seat at the table. It gives people an opportunity to be seen and heard, and work on this together. Another place that is interesting in watching the dynamics of an organization, seeing somebody need time away. I've talked to a couple of executives where they actually did a caring and compassionate intervention with somebody that they saw was on a path to burnout.
Yeah.
And they recommended time away. And in both cases, they gave some great latitude to the individuals, but they did it without calling it a sabbatical, but they gave time away. So they were kind of stepping into the opportunity, but not fully stepping into it. When an organization looks at it and says, this person's going to get time away, whether it's to go write a book, conduct research, or have family time, if the time is planned well, both for the individual and for the organization, sustainability happens and resilience happens.
All right. So let's get into that for a second. How does someone approach their company and say, hey, I would like to do a sabbatical? What are the things they should have prepared before going in and making that pitch?
Yeah. So part of it is understanding what does the company do? Doing some homework.
Yeah.
So is it part of the benefit program? Asking some questions. Who's done it? Who, what is the expectation? And then once some of those things are known, you're also able to understand the social and political currents by doing some of that homework. So I'll give you a couple examples. In doing your due diligence, you can find out that, yes, there are people that take sabbaticals here and it's routine, or we have it incorporated in this way. And an example of things that are done ritualistically and in a structured way is some organizations actually, when they are moving people from middle management to upper management, they get a sabbatical. And then when they come back from their sabbatical, they go into a cohort with other people that are also ascending, so that you've had your time to focus on you and the others in your life. And then you join and you get to go together as a cohort to learn what's expected at this next tier. So
Yeah.
that's where an organization already has it designed into the system. Some organizations have sabbaticals on the books and people take them, but maybe in our region or maybe in our function, we don't need those. That's not, they may need them, but we don't. That gives you an idea of what are you up against, or are they for you? Is that clear?
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is like when you, because it's so hard to pin down what corporation structures are like anymore, right? Like you have big companies and you have small startups, right? And small startups are very mindful of the cash they're burning through. And then you have mid-sized companies, right? And so we've identified sort of the importance and benefit of a sabbatical. But if I'm a worker, if I'm a professional and I'm like, you know what? I would like a sabbatical. And I think people have to be a little bit reasonable, right? Like if you've
Yeah,
been at the job for like a month, don't go in asking for a month off, right? Like
right,
obviously, let's just
right.
set that aside, right? But if
Yeah.
you've been with the company for, 4 or 5 years, then you might, so I'm just wondering, like, should people come in and go, I would like, in making their presentation or making their pitch, because let's say a company doesn't have a sabbatical program, like going in and saying, hey, this is what I would like to do. I don't know what kinds of tools you have for people to go in and make that pitch the best one possible.
Yeah. So part of it is understanding the context of where's the organization going and how can what I'm looking to do be beneficial for the organization or my team as well as myself.
Right.
So part
What's
of
in it
it
for
is
them?
put so yeah, what's in it? Who are the major stakeholders that are going to be impacted, and what are the benefits? And I wish more people would actually frame this before they just decide, you know what, I need time off and I'm just going to quit.
Yeah.
And that is an option. But generally, if people are trying to do something and have a desire, if you frame it in what is beneficial, mutual beneficial, and also if you're not trying to do it tomorrow. Now, an exception to that is if you have a medical emergency or some kind of family crisis, which oftentimes is one of the ways the data shows a lot of people take sabbaticals because of either a personal medical crisis or a caregiving situation. And even in those situations, you can do some of the same steps so that you can step away and help the team continue to function and help leave that mindset and that mind share at the door when you go off to do your caregiving responsibilities. If you're trying to do this and you have a good window to look ahead, and you also have a good sense of the business rhythm of the organization that you're in, you can start looking at what might be an ideal time, and to lay it out in advance so that there is a runway before you go, actually do it, and then the reentry coming back.
Right. So like if I was an accountant, I could go like, oh, April 17th would be a good day to take. You know what I mean? Like, but to your point, just like understanding the rhythm of the business. If winter is your busy sales time, then don't go in and ask for November off, because that's you're going to have less of a chance of a yes in that, because it's everybody's busy time. But if you know when the business waxes and wanes, then you have to your point, just about rhythms, I think is super interesting. And I want to just alert everybody who's watching, please feel free to submit a question and I will ask. And I will ask it, I should say. Okay, so let's say you've made your pitch, you've gotten the okay to get a sabbatical. I'm going to just stick with like a 1 month, right? Because I understand that they can have different forms, but per our earlier part of the discussion where you said you need at least a month, let's just say a month is sort of a reasonable thing for people to do. How do you structure a sabbatical to make sure that it's a successful one so that when you're done at the end of that month, you do come back feeling reinvigorated and refreshed and ready to pick up the mantle back?
One aspect of that is being very clear with what the intention is. What is the purpose that you are seeking during that sabbatical? So, is it rest and renewal? Is it trying to understand what the next chapter brings? So part of it is being intentional.
Mhm.
So common things that people do during their sabbatical, they might travel and explore. They might be working on another craft or um, another like starting a parallel career or a parallel skill set, like writing or art. They might be looking for things that they can reconnect with, whether it's for themselves or with other people.
All right. So you earlier in that, when we first started talking, you mentioned the word ritual, right? And so how do you bake in rituals into what do you well, I guess anything could be considered a ritual, right? But how do you bake those in? And let me ask you this, right? If you're willing to share, I know you recently went on a sabbatical. What are some of the rituals you do that other people might learn from, or as like at least a starting point?
Sure. So one thing that I do is I journal.
Okay.
And in doing journaling, it gives you an opportunity to reflect. And I also do some practices of gratitude and learning so that I start unpacking um, experiences I've had to gain some of the insights into patterns I might not normally in the fast-paced day-to-day be picking up on. Um, when in one of the important aspects of planning a sabbatical is planning for both structured time and unstructured time. So what I mean by that is, let's say that you would like to build some of your skills as a writer. And you might write for business, but writing for yourself or writing a memoir or writing a blog is a different kind of skill set. So in that case, if you're building some writing or art skills, you would allocate some parts of your day daily to build that practice. Um, but having unstructured time is equally important because that's kind of the integration time. So that's the time to walk in nature or go to a museum or feed the things that are in alignment with the intended purpose of the sabbatical.
Yeah, I wonder. So, like, in writing classes that I've taken before, one of the things they've said is like to really get your mind writing, start only allow yourself to write 1 minute, on the first day, and you put the pen down after a minute, and then the next day you do 10 minutes, and you write for 10 minutes, but you absolutely put it away at 10 minutes. And the idea is to sort of train your brain into looking forward to the time when it has the ability to write. And so I'm wondering, just like, how structured do you think people should make? Right now, writing is just one example, right? But
Right.
so for you, were you very rigid about like in the morning, I'm going to journal from 9 to 10, or were you more loose and you just say, by the end of the day, I need to journal, or did you say I need to do this many pages?
Yeah. So so this particular I called it a mini sabbatical because it was 32 days.
Hmm.
So it was just about a month. And because I call myself a sabbaticalist and because I've taken several longer sabbaticals as well as shorter, um, I am well practiced. And what I mean by that is um, in my sabbatical pre-planning, I had 3 purposes. And one was to work on my craft, which is new crafts that I'm building skills. And I'm really trying to up level those crafts. One was connecting with my husband in a deeper way. And one was um, connecting and collaborating with peers that are ahead of me in certain fields that I want to grow in.
Okay.
One of the things I really like about Open Water is talking about wisdom. And we all in our experiential journeys grow in wisdom. So the ways to talk about that latter piece, so connecting with peers that I could grow from. Um, so 2 design elements in the May sabbatical were um, going to Modern Elder Academy's annual homecoming in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that organization has 5,000 alumni. So about 500 of them gathered in Santa Fe for a weekend. So it was a weekend around people who come from a variety of backgrounds and are wise, many beyond their years, because the age range can be in the 30s up to 80s, and they're wisdom sharers. So just being together is an opportunity to share and collaborate and connect and learn things at a fast pace, growth oriented, very, you're already kindred spirits. So you're not having to meet strangers, you're meeting kindred spirits that you can gain from within a weekend.
Sure.
Um,
Okay, so we have talked about what you should do prior to taking a sabbatical. We talked about some ways to make your sabbatical successful while you're on a sabbatical. Now let's talk about after sabbatical, right? Because I imagine that for you, the process didn't end on day 32. You didn't go like, whoop, this sabbatical's over. It's day 32 and I'm done.
that's
And
right.
then you just walked out, right? Like I
That's
am
right.
sure that there are things that you do post sabbatical. And so what are some of the strategies for doing for, after you're done with the I'm taking time off part to make sure you keep maximizing that time that you did spend off?
Yes. Yes. So good point. And if we use the framework of, so it was a 5-week month. So that last week was dedicated to reentry. So in the design of the sabbatical timeframe, reentry was a piece of this. And the reentry included reconnecting and reintegrating. And so coming back from rich experiences that you are now coming back into day-to-day life, um, it is very much kind of like a spacecraft re-entering orbit. And there can be friction, and you should anticipate some friction as you are coming into a different atmosphere than you've just been in. Um, and in order to do that, you kind of like prepare. You anticipate it's going to feel different. And your observation skills, many of your, the things that you created the space for will feel you'll feel some dissonance. Like when you go to the grocery store and people are jockeying for the quickest line to get through, it's going to be different than where you're coming from. And so anticipation is part of that. Reconnection with the people that you've been away from is part of um, landing. And um, encapsulating what you just experienced is very important. Whether it's putting together notes, continuing on the journaling, um, and reintegrating what have I learned and what do I want to take with me and what do I want to leave behind.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so all right, so we've talked about it from like a personal standpoint, but for companies, like you help people and companies set up sabbaticals. What are some
Right.
things companies should be thinking about, right? Like, do you have a typical like, oh, you should be, in setting up a program, you should have people work this many years and you should offer it as this much. I mean, I understand every company is different, right? And your solution is not cookie cutter, but what are some of the things companies considering this should think about?
Yeah. So part of it is like, what is the flow of a business? How many years is it typical for people to be in a team environment, be a leader, be a project lead, um, before you expect rotations? So one of the things when somebody's stepping away is the opportunity. It might be easy, Chris, for you to think, oh, you know what? I can't wait. I could do Annette's job. I can't wait till I get the opportunity to be in that role. Um, and by me stepping away and you and our team figuring out how the work's going to get done while Annette's away, you get a chance to find out, hey, how good are you at it? And
Right.
do you like it? And oh, are there some things that, dang, I'm really good here, but I've got some gaps there. Now the organization gets to learn that, and so do you. So when it's time to put together your development plan, or I come back and maybe I continue to go work in the same capacity, but oftentimes reconfiguration goes on with the roles because people have been able to level up and learn. So oftentimes when people come back from sabbaticals, people get promoted, people move on, people change because now there's been some growth in the organization and there's also been some identified gaps usually.
All right. Well, Annette, this has been fascinating and thoughtful, and a bit revealing and eye opening to me. So thank you so much for taking the time. If people wanted to find out or like learn more about setting up their own sabbatical or a company looking how they could set up sabbaticals, what's the best way for them to find you?
The two best ways to find me are to contact me at trilogydesignworks.com
Okay.
and to find me on LinkedIn. And if they find me on LinkedIn, send me a direct message if you have questions about sabbaticals, because sabbaticals are something that if you do your homework well and you have some good people around you, you can design it. Um, I suggest for most people that a sabbatical is a good thing to have an accountability partner or a guide. And if you need some resources, it's something that I can help people with, but it also can be done um, by self-design.
Excellent. Annette Mason is the founder of Trilogy Design Works. And as we learned today, a sabbaticalist. Annette, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you, Chris.